Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RevOps Demos That Don't Suck, where we sit down with some of the leading and most innovative revenue technology companies that are out there to get a demo and a walkthrough of their products so that you don't have to. And they always promise us that the demo is certainly not going to suck. I am your co-host, Matthew Volm, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op, a community of 18,000 plus revenue operators from all across the globe. One of the many programs that we have is this content series on demos. We have a Slack group, we have a newsletter, we have digital events, in-person events, conferences, courses, education, a whole lot more, all of which is available on our website. But we are not here to talk about that today. We are here to sit down with Kevin Davis, who is the CEO of BoogieBoard. And BoogieBoard is AI sales territory design. And Kevin, like I said, you got a lot to live up to here with making sure that this demo does not suck. I promise to grade you after we get through all of this. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us a little more about the origin story of BoogieBoard and kind of a little bit about the product solution before I get into a lot more detailed questions for you.
Of course. So I came up through sales and operations at high growth tech companies, NetSuite, and then I worked at Google for a long time. And when I was working at those companies, one thing that really sucked was territory planning. You get your territory as a sales rep. You didn't know what was going to be in it. You felt like there was not really care in the process of producing it for you. And when I got into operations and actually tried to design these territories, I realized that it was much more difficult than I realized. There was a ton of competing stakeholders, a really hard quantitative problem. And so the genesis of our company was, what if we could build a suggestion engine that takes all your market data, all your company data, allows you to one-click design territories. And that's still the core of our product and what we do today. We've overlaid project management and a platform component so that it's kind of trying to change the whole vibe of the process for anyone who touches it. We've overlaid quota capabilities to allow you more of a one-stop shop. But at the core, what we do is an extremely deep territory design suggestion engine.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that you've lived through this problem yourself with territory design at a couple of different companies. I think most revenue operators have faced this or are facing this, or shall I say, face this every single year, quarter, week, day, right? It's one of those things that comes along with the job. But let's make people feel seen here. If we talk about the problem space a little bit, what are some of those problems that operators are experiencing when it comes to territory design today that you all are on a mission to solve for?
Yeah. So the easiest one, the most like table stakes one, is they do this in a spreadsheet. It's hardest at the end of the year, where you have tons of people asking you for different things which are conflicting. You have a giant spreadsheet where the y-axis is all of the accounts in your database, so it can't load. And then you have to try to do this really challenging thing, which is make everybody happy. You give them their territories using, of course, some bad data. They ultimately say, these are terrible, and then you go on. And so it's a bad process for everyone involved. For the operator, they have to just go and sit in a spreadsheet while they're doing their end-of-year planning, the busiest time of year, and deliver a result that then gets them bad reviews. And for a sales rep or a sales leader, they feel like they're not being put in a position for success, or maybe they have no idea, or maybe they're getting delayed at the beginning of the year. So all told, depending if you're a sales leader, sales rep, RevOps, it's bad vibes across the board.
Yeah. And so what are some of the ways that you guys are looking to solve for that, or approaching a solution to that problem, turning those bad vibes into good vibes? What are the things that BoogieBoard does?
Take it out of spreadsheets. That's an easy one. All your data comes into our platform. There's no more sending around version X, whatever.
Final. Yeah.
Then there's actually solving the really challenging quantitative component of this, of bringing everyone's goals and desires into a model and clicking a button and getting a one-click territory design suggestion that your company can then use in a very clear way with a beautiful kind of experiential overlay for sales leaders and sellers to just reset the way that you're going about this process. No longer do you have to do it manually. It's automated.
Yeah. All right. So that all sounds great, but I need to see to believe. So why don't you kind of pull up some of the product and start walking us through some of those kind of core use cases as it relates to revenue operations, some of the stuff that you mentioned before, taking people out of spreadsheets, giving them that source of truth, allowing different stakeholders to collaborate, all of that good stuff.
All right. So at the core of every one of those spreadsheets, you're building these giant pivot tables. And you have your reps on the y-axis, and you have your account data, your attributes about how you're trying to balance your territories on the x-axis. We call these balance goals. And no longer do you have to do that in spreadsheets. BoogieBoard auto configures these for you. And instead of taking your balance goals and trying to hit them manually, what you do in BoogieBoard is you tell our suggestion engine, I want you to balance based on X, Y, and Z. So in this case, these are books for an enterprise sales team where they get some customers, some prospects. We balance on account hierarchies. They've got this prospect grade, industry score. They're trying to get the same amount of total renewals per quarter as well as dollars per quarter. So it gets really precise on how you can do the balancing, and these are configurable. I'll show you that in a minute. But these are how you're telling the algorithm to do the design, and then you simply click the button, and you can see it's all red. Things are way out of whack. This is the end of year. I'm hiring 3 new reps, so they of course have 0 accounts today, and things have gotten massively imbalanced between LeBron, Caitlin, and Angelina, our existing reps on the team. And then so BoogieBoard, after I click that, is balancing accounts in the background. So moving things around and trying to solve for all these balance goals in the least disruptive way possible. And it's going to do that while factoring in things like quota, the level of your rep. You can see that's why we've got it broken out here between our AE2s and our AE1s. And it's going to take a few minutes to cook, but it's going to do this balancing effort for us to allow RevOps the first pass at a territory design. I'll pause there to see if I'm being clear for you.
Yeah. What are some of the most common kind of ways that people balance their books for their reps? Like I see up there, you mentioned some stuff like prospects, renewals. Like what are some of the most common ways that people approach that?
Yeah, let me jump into our balance goals. So you can generate it based on any field data that you can bring into BoogieBoard. You can see some common ones here: account type, number of children, industry scores. You might develop hiring alerts, anything that you can think of that's really a signal or a deep ICP field that you want to test as a market hypothesis can be brought in here. We've got a balance goal generator GPT linked on our website that you can also use if you don't know what to do from a balance goal standpoint, but you can be pretty precise with these.
Yeah, that's great. And you said it's a one click to kind of do the balancing. And so how many iterations, I guess, do people kind of typically go through? Do you give people more than one iteration at a time? How does that work?
Yeah, they can do as many iterations as they want. We love to have them in here bouncing. You can see it just takes a couple minutes to kind of solve the initial problem. You often have to run one of these balancing efforts to understand your own constraints a little better and figure out what levers to pull. So some companies will do this on a weekly basis if they're topping up accounts. Some companies will do this a couple times a year where it's a big exercise like this, and then the middle will be more maintenance mode. The way that we're able to kind of understand what your setup even is by, if we zoom out, like you have a whole territory engine built in here. So I know what my enterprise node is because I've come in here and defined it, and I can push all of this back to Salesforce. And I can come in here and maybe I have an EMEA region and I want to configure, hey, what should be my Western Europe patch? And so I can come in here and do things like that, which could also be geographical territories or sub-regions if I wanted to. So the balancing is just part of it, and it's all kind of led to by the generation of this model.
Yeah, that looks great. Um, and how much, I guess, and apologies if I'm kind of flashing maybe ahead, but I'm thinking about
Mhm.
configuration of some of the stuff that you were just showing and kind of setup too. So how much, like, are we talking, does stuff start with like a blank slate here? Do people need to have their data model, territory models set up in a certain way to hook in and sync into BoogieBoard? Like, what's the starting point, best starting point typically like?
Yeah, and that's a good question. We're going to do it for you. So we started this business as a consulting effort, and so our implementation process, we just overlay that consulting effort. And so we have kind of prepackaged balance goals that we think are probably going to be good, depending on what you want to do. We'll come in here and we'll add the customizations like filters or applying them to certain reps and not others, and take care of all this configuration for you to get you up and running, to get you used to a new way of working. And then we'll also stick with you to manage more of a territory management cycle where you're monitoring alerts in here, developing workflows if you want to automate things like topping up books or moving accounts from your new to growth sales. So it's a much more hands on style of implementation than with many other companies.
Yeah. And then just kind of last question before I let you continue. What would How hard would this stuff be that you've showed us so far if you were trying to do this in spreadsheets?
Well, what I would say is you've got significant computing power here
Yeah.
trying to solve for this equity, and it takes 5 or 6 minutes depending on what you're trying to do. But it's actually mathematically impossible to do it as a person to achieve this equity. Now you can make sacrifices and say, okay, we just want to give everybody the same number of accounts and be on our way. So you have to be interested in quality and precision to
Yeah.
care about that, but it's impossible to do as a human.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go from impossible to 5 minutes later having something that's equitable, fair, and precise.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great.
So if I'll just then kind of move forward and talk about one of the other areas that people get stuck managing is their people and how they relate to territories. It's not just about grouping accounts. So we've got a roles engine where you can come in here and again, I'm in my enterprise node here as an example, and I can create roles that populate down the territory. So, for example, Jason Day is my sales manager, so he's going to be on every account in all of these territories. I'm going to map LeBron to a territory, and I can enter his quota, which you'll see in a second is related to the design itself. Now, maybe my BDRs are mapped one to one with my sales reps. And so you can see Rip Hamilton is specific to LeBron, along with the three other people that are in his territory. This is the same place where I would do things like adding temporary coverage, assigning out accounts when someone leaves. I could simply remove LeBron from the territory or get flexible with dealing like paternity leave and things along those lines.
Yeah. And so is this kind of populated based on, again, like whatever you guys ingest from Salesforce or something like that? Or what's the starting point on this side?
It's almost always going to be coming from your user information in Salesforce. Almost all of the companies that we work
Hmm.
with are running on Salesforce, and then we're going to push it back to Salesforce based on if you want, we'll auto configure Salesforce's territory model tool so that these things are automatically populated on an account. And then here's what the actual model screen looks like. So you don't have to deal with setting all of this up. We put all this in here. But yeah, we're bringing in those users usually from a Salesforce user list.
Yeah. So since we're talking about kind of Salesforce a little bit, can you tell us a little more on the Salesforce integration? What's it like? What does it do? What should people consider as it relates to pushing and pulling data back and forth between their Salesforce CRM?
Yeah, we start slow, so we have a two-way connection, and we start with always just ingesting their data in, so that when you're doing an end of year design or when you're doing your first designs with us, you're using current information. You don't have to deal with the spreadsheet being stale. That's like an easy one. Then, after you finish your design, you can push your territories live, and so you can do this on an ongoing basis. We can write to Salesforce every night and we can pull in from Salesforce every night. So if you fast forward like 2 months and you're no longer in a planning situation, you might have sales reps that are allowed to disqualify accounts. So if I disqualify SoFi, let me see, make sure I'm disqualifying it. So if I disqualify SoFi and then I refresh my account data, I can come in here, look at SoFi, and it's with Angelina Jolie. And it is also being flagged on my exceptions list because it no longer fits within my territory model. Actually, it's not being flagged as an exception because I need to refresh my screen. Forgive me. Where's my territory model? So you can see here, once I do a refresh, I have this alert that says, hey, there's a bunch of accounts that are disqualified. And you can see in here all these different accounts that my reps maybe have disqualified, and then I could go in and rebalance. This is just an example of a territory management workflow where you're dealing with like more of the day to day. Okay, so then if I'm going to pause my design here just for the sake of time. It's going to want to run for a couple minutes longer, but I'll say this is good enough. So the next step in the process is usually going to be, I've done a carve as RevOps, but now I want the sales leaders to come in, or maybe even the sales reps to come in, depending on the company, and run some checks on this. So I could click into Angelina's territory, and I'm going to have a few pre-built views to see what accounts she lost, what accounts she gained. Does she have different hierarchies that are set up, and are they behaving in the way we want to with the rules that we've set up for them? Does she have any exception accounts in her name that are disqualified or something along those lines? Sales leaders can come in here, make comments. Anything they do is going to be tracked in this activity feed. And if they move an account from one person to another, they're going to get a pop-up that says, hey, you got to behave along the lines of the hierarchy rules that we've set for you.
When people leave comments in there, do they get alerts in their inbox or Slack or anything like that?
Not yet. We don't have that set up yet. But the idea here is now, as a sales leader, you'll get temporary access to BoogieBoard, maybe just during a carve period or during a particular change management exercise. You're invited as a collaborator to a specific node. You have permissions on what you're allowed to do and what you're allowed not to do. And so it kind of changes the way that sales leaders and sellers experience the territory design process. Everything is anchored in a really clear view of, hey, these are our balance goals, right? This is what we're balancing on. This is how the algorithm is doing it. So instead of arguing about a singular account, you could say, hey, I disagree with that balancing goal, which is a little more systemic. And you can relate that back to the design itself.
Yeah. So is I know we stopped the design process on this early, but is the idea those bottom two kind of scenario charts would essentially be all green, indicating that everything is kind of fairly and equitably balanced across all the different buckets?
Yeah, if possible. There are situations where it can't get all green because you may
Yeah.
have one thing I didn't talk about, you may have locked down a bunch of accounts. We'll usually
Mhm.
recommend locking rules around, hey, tell the algorithm that these accounts should definitely not move. We're already trying to minimize churn or customer thrash, but you
Yeah.
may want to coach that further with locking. And so you may realize that, okay, we've put too many constraints on this that we can't solve for equity. And so you might go back to the drawing board based on what it's able to achieve.
Yeah. No, that makes sense too.
Um, Let me show you. Then we've also got some companies that was an account-based model, obviously, and some companies will use a geographical model. You see my screen with the map here? And so this is your more like traditional sales territory modeling exercise, where I need to break the United States into 6 separate territories, and the same premise exists for us. Come in here, based on your balance goals, you click a button, turn on your live refresh if you want to watch it cook, and it's going to go and figure out how to carve the US in the way that best solves for your balance goals. You can lock states in place. You can break states down into 2-digit zip codes, 3, 5-digit zip codes. We've got sort of a process by which we think you can introduce geography to your company in the least disruptive way. We start with just time zones, then limiting distance. Then, if you want to get into these geographical considerations, you can. It's going to give you all sorts of different solutions that you can go check. Geographical models usually take a little bit longer to cook because they are more quantitatively difficult.
Yeah. What do you, I guess I'm curious, what's the maybe split that you see between your customers in terms of geographical versus account based? Do you see people actually making shifts in their territory model after they like start with BoogieBoard? What's that look like?
Yeah, we see a lot of so the younger we work mostly with software companies. The younger kind of more lean software companies that we work with tend to be on more account based models. But
Yeah.
as they grow, they're trying to figure out how to introduce geography into the mix. Some of the more traditional, larger enterprise based companies might use geography in a more traditional way, but they might be trying to overlay like a target account list concept within that, or they might have some elements of their business that are non geographical. So it really depends on the company, the product they sell, and how mature they are.
Yeah. And you said this operates the same way as the account base that we looked at before, where you can set up the balancing goals. Are those? I imagine those are those typically the same type of balancing goals, whether you're account based or geography based, then as
Yeah,
well.
for the most part, yeah, and the configuration is going to be basically the same, but you might if you're selling, like, a physical product, you're really gonna care about the distance and, like, drive time and
Yeah.
stuff like that. If you're selling software, it's more about limiting travel, creating community in a certain area, so that tends to be a similar balance goals to an account-based model.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the Salesforce integration. It sounds like most of your customers are on Salesforce as well. Do you support other CRMs, and what are outside of the CRM? Are there any popular or common integrations that people should consider as it relates to BoogieBoard?
Snowflake and other customer data warehouses we're seeing pop up more and more now, and you can bring your data in from them. We often try to have customers get as much data into Salesforce as possible if they're using Salesforce. We have an open API, so we connect with all sorts of different stuff. We don't have a lot of companies running HubSpot. Those companies tend to be smaller and not as painfully in need of territory design as Salesforce customers.
Yeah. And so on that note, since we were talking about kind of customer types, who is typically a good fit for the Boogie Board sort of product? What are some current customers that you all have? And then for folks sitting out there who, are watching, listening, what's a typical kind of customer profile for you guys?
Yeah, we've got a big range of B2B SaaS companies that are customers. Blackline, Watershed, Full Story, Fundraise Up would be some of the ones you know. We've got case studies on our websites. So that once they reach a point where this is enough of a pain in the ass to do in spreadsheets, they kind of start thinking, okay, they need to also have enough of a RevOps team that can influence a decision. Usually, sales isn't usually going to go out and solve this on their own. That usually starts at like 30 sales reps, kind of how we think about it, rough math. The more sales reps that they have, the bigger the problem this is. So we tend to work with kind of like high enterprise, or excuse me, high mid market, lower enterprise style companies.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about the implementation process. You said it's very consultative that you guys, I mean, that's how you guys started, was consulting on territory and territory design. So what does the implementation process kind of look like? If someone said today, like, hey, Kevin, this looks great. I need this. I need to get out of spreadsheets. How long does the implementation process take? What does that typically look like? How much time before someone could be up and running with BoogieBoard?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a case study on our website where we redesigned Challenger sales. Challenger, the brand, their sales territories in 2 days. So as long as it takes you to connect your data to Salesforce, and then which is 20 minutes, then for us to figure out, hey, are we adjusting a current design? And so we need to take
Hmm.
that into consideration, or are we doing a new design? That's sort of like the table stakes, because if we're adjusting a current, we'll build your current state logic and then build balance goals with you. That can take a few weeks. It depends on if the company knows its own data schema, if the company knows what it wants to do or not. And then we click the button and we can move pretty quickly. But we'll usually do it around like an end of year design, or if they are hiring people and say, hey, let's pick an event that we can structure this implementation around.
Yeah. And when it comes to pricing and kind of economics, what can you share on how you guys charge, what the pricing model is? Or you're just talking about implementation? Is that included? Is that a separate sort of implementation fee? What can you share on that?
Let me pull up. All of our pricing is public. So let me show you that. You see my screen? All right, so it's based on the number of territories, which is the number of either like account books or geographical territories that we're going to design in the product. So it's usually a proxy for like quota carrying reps. So it's not a licensing model per se where you're paying for access. It's more of a usage based metric. Most of the companies that we work with are on our max plan. So that gets you 100 territories, up to 100 territories, $3K a month. For additional territories, we charge an additional cost depending on the amount of territories that you have. We have a calculator on our website, which will give you all this information. And then we do charge an implementation fee, a one-time fee.
Yeah. And for folks, so I see on here, it looks like contact us forms. Is there, I mean, again, this doesn't seem like territories is a very complex, headache prone sort of process. So but I'm not, again, I'm not going to assume that there's no self-serve kind of free trial sort of way into the product. So I guess I'll ask you that question. Is there a way for people to kind of try things out? If they're looking at this and they're like, hey, this looks incredible. Do they need to kind of come in, talk to someone on the BoogieBoard team? What's the best way for somebody to get started?
Yeah, they just if you click that get a demo button, it'll go right to our calendar. One of the co-founders will meet with you. We'll set up a proof of concept with you. You can absolutely use and touch the product for free. We're going to curate it. We want to do a proof of concept before you would jump on the product. We don't just allow like your traditional PLG. Hey, you click a button, you're in free trial mode. We found that it requires a new way of working. You have to be willing to kind of change the way you're thinking about territories, and so we probably will release that at some point next year. But right now, we don't have that option.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense because territories are one of those things that I feel like every operator is kind of just taken for granted, that the pain that they go through every year with them, week in, week out, is just part of the job. And what you're demonstrating is like, hey, it doesn't have to be. You can leverage, great technology to help you kind of solve for some of those problems that we were just talking about before. And so my last question for you, Kevin, is around differentiation. So obviously we talked a lot about spreadsheets. That's kind of a typical starting point for people when it comes to territory design. There, are certainly other software products out there as well that can help you with territories. But for BoogieBoard specifically, if you had to pick like one thing and just one thing only, what would be the one differentiator that you would say puts BoogieBoard on top compared to other alternative products, spreadsheets, just other ways of doing territories?
Yeah. So we're not going to force you as a company to go and limit the way that you want to design territories. We're not going to force you into some sort of overly simplistic logical model or have a suggestion engine that can basically just balance a number of accounts or something like that. Through our consulting, we got just insanely deep on territories, on how to do this algorithmically. It's one of the reasons why we try to do a POC in every deal we're in, because we can show that if you click that button, you will receive something that's really exciting and helpful. I don't think that there's a lot of other companies out there that can offer that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's hugely valuable, being able to find a solution that can fit the way you do business instead of you having to fit the way you do business to the way that the product tells you you should. And obviously, you're from the great state of Wisconsin. You are Midwest nice. I know everything you have said here is completely true and genuine. Kevin and I have also shared a plate of cheese curds together in Madison. So he's a great guy. He's got an incredible product as well. And so for everybody out there, if you're looking at this, BoogieBoard.ai, Kevin and the rest of his team are also in the RevOps Co-op community. You can see them in the Slack group. They're on LinkedIn. They're at most of our in-person events. They're at a bunch of our digital events as well. So whether it's through RevOps Co-op on LinkedIn or over at the BoogieBoard website, go and check them out. I promise you will not regret it. But Kevin, that's all I got for you, my friend. Thank you very much for giving us the rundown and the tour of the product. Looks incredible. I never would have thought that something as complicated and complex as territory design could be boiled down into literally a click or two, depending on how many iterations you want to do. So the product looks incredible. Great job, my friend.